Good morning, everybody. It's Ben Jones here from Batdorf and Bronson Coffee Roasters. Just hanging out in my workshop this morning. It's Friday, I believe it's the 12th day of March. About the last year, dates have kind of snuck off into oblivion. Today's little coffee experiment, I want to look at the relationship between grind size and brew time, or water contact time, but using an incredibly simple brew method. So what I have here is I've pre-ground up a bunch of coffee. I went fairly coarse. I don't know if you can pick that up on the camera, but this is something we might use for French press or a Chemex. Maybe if you are familiar, you might use this, well, it'll be pretty coarse for cupping, but you could. So the general rule when you're brewing coffee, to get optimum flavor pulled out of the beans, we want to balance out how long the coffee particles are in contact with the hot water. It's very much like steeping a bag of tea. If you've ever had a black tea that has steeped for too long and pulled out the astringencies, the same thing happens with coffee. A longer steep doesn't necessarily make a stronger cup of coffee. It pulls out flavors beyond what's pleasant. The really cool thing about the coffee bean is that it gives us all the good stuff first. We get the caffeine early on. We tend to get the bright and lively flavors. We get the chocolatey tones. And then we get the sugars. Right after the sugars, typically, we go into the things that taste of burnt matches, rubbing alcohols, medicinal flavors, things that we don't enjoy as much. So the goal here is, when the grind size is very small, to avoid burnt matches, rubbing alcohol, we want our contact time to be very small. It doesn't take much time for the flavors to migrate out of the tiny particles. As those particles grow, we can allow our water contact time to expand with that. So with this really coarse coffee, about a 4-minute contact time is decent. That'll give us some good flavor development. But with that, there's some other variables we can play with. So what I'm gonna do is, I've got a pair of good old-fashioned mason jars, just straight from the pantry. And I'm gonna take my AeroPress scoop, and into each one, I'm just gonna put a big heap of coffee. I'm not gonna worry about weighing it out because we're trying to make this really easy and simple. Make it kind of low tech. All right. There we go, got some coffee added in there. Now, I've got hot water and my timer, and I'm just going to add hot water. I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it. Hot water to each of those. Excellent. Now as these steep, our basic contact time, we can see that. So right there we have some mason jars with water tossed in there. Sorry for all the wiggles, there we go. We're going to let that steep. There are some things I can do to speed this up. So with one of these, I'm going to take it and I'm just going to stir. This stirring action, we like to use the big fancy word of agitation in the coffee business. Every time we stir, every time the water moves around those coffee particles, it acts like a piñata shaking out the flavors. Like when you hit a piñata and you break a small hole, then you shake it to get all the candy out. Or if you're shaking coins out of a piggy bank. That's what we're doing with this one right here. As I'm stirring, I'm shaking out more flavors. This one here, where it's just sitting, those flavors are developing much more slowly, and it's going to give us a more controlled cup. Just for kicks, I'm going to take this one that our stir cup, and I'm going to, this is kind of fun, these are just regular flat bottom coffee filters. I'm using 2 of them. And then I have my mason jar ring. I'm just going to feed the filter up through the ring. Make sure I leave a little skirt sticking out all the way around. I'll just put that on. And I'm just going to screw that down, and you probably guessed this is going to be our filtration method for that. Very good. All right, I want to make sure I get that nice and snug because I don't want that to come apart. We're about 2.5 minutes into our brew. That would have been disastrous here. There we go. Whenever we're doing these things live, we always get these little hiccups where I can't get the lid thread on just right. There it is. All right, so now I have my mason jar with the ring holding on to a filter, and my other one is just setting. All right, for this one that's just sitting, I'm going to take my regular old mug top pour over, my Melita style filter. Let's put that on top of my decanter, and I'm just going to take good old fashioned Melita filter. Always give a fold of the top, and the crease along the side, fold that in as well. And that, just set that in. All right, now this one that has been stirred, that stirring action sped up the flavor movement, so I'm going to start that decanting first. I'm just going to decant it into my Chemex because I had it handy. So all I'm going to do is just take this, and I'm just going to put that upside down in there, and I'm just going to let all that coffee drain through. Of course, if you don't have a Chemex, just use, anything else that's handy. The goal is to make this easy. All right, now this other one here, I can't resist. I just gotta rinse that, just kind of help pin that to the wall. And there we go. And then of course we're gonna have a little bit of water to pour out. Thank you for indulging me. All right. And this one, I'm not even gonna disturb it. I'm just gonna take this and I'm just gonna pour that in. And we're essentially straining it. Straining, filtering, you can use whatever language you want. We're separating the beverage liquid from the grounds that we don't want to chew on. You almost always, I imagine, can find a mason jar. If you don't have a mug top pour over thing, not a worry. You can do like we did here on this one, where we use the metal ring to secure a filter. Your filter media could be anything. You can take, if your coffee's coarse enough, you can use cheesecloth. You can use a cloth napkin. You can use a t-shirt. You can use any kind of scrap of cloth, as long as it's clean. You can get a nice little filter. They do get a little slow sometimes, but the point is we can make a real easy cup of coffee with some patience. Now the contact time on these, with the one that I stirred, remember we pulled all the flavors out, so I'm expecting this one to taste a lot more kind of medicinal, what we call over-extracted. I left that coffee and water in contact probably longer than it really should have. I'm just going to pull that out. There's some coffee here. I'll pour it in my mug. I'm going to have a little taster. I've had much worse cups of coffee, but I did push that into, I stirred it right into burnt matches, rubbing alcohol. It has some of those tones to it. All right, I'm going to take the other one, and this is the one where we did no stir. A little taster here. Yeah, it's a lot better. Definitely, it's chocolatey and there's some sweetness to it. It's a little smoky. The coffee I'm brewing today is Dancing Goats, our house, kind of our house blend. That's a good cup of coffee. Lesson to be learned: big chunks, sitting without any extra movement, can really handle a lot of steeping. We see this with the French press, where you can actually push your brew times. If you don't stir it, you can push into 10, 12, 15. I have a friend who goes very coarse and over 18 minutes on his French press. So if you are worried about letting it sit for too long, go coarse and don't stir a lot. If you're feeling impatient and you want to get that coffee done quickly, stirring will help pull out more flavors. So stirring in full immersion, where we have everything sitting in a jar, is very easy. You just put in some kind of spoon and stir it. If you're doing a pour over, something like the Chemex or the Kalita Wave, you can get in there and you can stir. It's a little awkward. Typically we control turbulence by how we're pouring from our kettle. Pouring from high up, pouring with aggressive swirls, those things will cause that movement of water, and that will increase our extraction. The full immersion brewer, that's what we're doing when we just let things steep in the mason jar or in a French press. It's fully immersed in that container. It's a fantastic way to brew a cup of coffee, incredibly simple, and that full immersion lets us get past a lot of challenges that are inherent into percolation or drip through brewing. That's a different chat for another day. But for now, thank you for joining. If you're finding that your coffee tastes bitter, like a burnt match, rubbing alcohol, medicinal, your contact time in relation to your grind size is too long. So make your coffee grounds a little bit bigger. That will allow less flavor development. If your coffee is tasting, well, if it's really sour, if the bitterness is more like a poorly peeled orange, or if you're getting that chocolate note, but it's more of just straight baker's cocoa, we've all at some point just taken a little spoonful of straight baker's cocoa, right? Like no sugar added. It's incredibly bitter. If you're getting those flavors, that orange peel, bitter greens, baker's cocoa without any sugar, we didn't let it steep long enough. So you can add more time, or you can shrink your particle size to let the flavors come out faster. So, particle size, contact time. That's kind of the secret to really tasty coffee. That and choosing great coffee, like, go to batdorfcoffee.com, and if I'm not drinking the Dancing Goats lately, I'm into the Guatemala El Valle. Been really enjoying this coffee, along with a little bit of our Ethiopia Guji Shikizo, the natural process. I toss a little bit of that in there just to give it a little bit of fruity liveliness. And as always, because I absolutely love and adore coffee, but I also like to sleep, I have some Peru decaf. Swiss water processed, uses only water to pull the caffeine out. It's some kind of really awesome magic that I don't perfectly understand, but that's okay. I studied English literature and writing. And then coffee. Osmosis is amazing. All right. Thanks for joining. I will be back on Monday, and we'll probably talk about some of the hazards of pour-over coffee. Things that make it awesome, things that make it hazardous. All right. Take care, everybody.